want to know which planet was causing your suffering? How about Earth?
Hey everyone, Brandonflex here, back with a new Shadowverse 2 video. For today's video, I want to go over basically my predictions for the newest, most powerful meta decks for the new set. These are all predictions, so if you see this video, do not jump to conclusions and craft immediately what I have on here. The only two decks I think you're allowed to do that on will be Forest and Rune, and it's not because I'm confident, that's because they've barely changed, and the edits that I have are very, very cheap. Well, for Forest. For Rune, there's no change from set 2. So with that said, jumping into it, if you want to get more investment and have a better idea of what is being built, then you really should go to a more dedicated content creator for that craft. But okay, let's get into actual video. So starting off with Forest, obviously this is the deck that I made if you looked at my YouTube channel, so I'm a bit more confident with how this deck should be playing out. If you see it, it is essentially the exact same deck. I've swapped out a few cards like Ambush from Above and Gardens of Lure, like some copies, for Eradicating Arrow and Bestial Swipe. So Eradicating Arrow is not really a risky craft. The issue with Forest is that there's a lot of good cards now for Forest, and the problem that we'll be having going forward is what dictates the perfect Forest card. And that will come down a lot to meta and tournament meta. I think Forest is top 3 in tournament meta almost no matter what, unless the power creep is really that bad. But in ladder, you'll have varying success depending on whether or not your deck is drawing well or tuned well for what you're playing against in the ladder meta. So Eradicating Forest, I think, is the risky craft. You might get a lot of them naturally, but Eradicating Arrow and Ambush from Above are basically interchangeable. The only real card I think that Forest got that's objectively just straight very good is Bestial Swipe, which is a bronze card. So if you're playing the set at all, playing any take 2, you'll naturally immediately get all the Bestial Swipes you need. So what is Bestial Swipe? It's a 2-mana card, deals 4 damage to enemy follower. If you hit 3 combo, you draw a card. This is obscenely efficient. If you have Godless Staff active, it's a super cycle. If you don't have Lily, it cycles for you. You can treat this card basically as a spell version of Lily that doesn't have as high of a peak, but very often has the same lows and mid rolls. Because if you played Lily a lot, you know that sometimes you are evoing a 2/2, a 3/3, or 4/4, and Bestial Swipe kills all of that. You don't get the body to swing afterwards, but you kill all of that and you don't have to evo. So you can save those evos for another Lily, for even more draw, for your extra Glades, for face damage with a Roach bounce. So Bestial Swipe gives you a lot more cycle, gives you some much needed targeting and targeted damage that Forest lacked that you only really got with Lily. And worst comes to worst, you don't even need to draw from it. You can just play it as a straight up 2 deal 4 and then combo into something like your May or a Cambent or Landment Cairn on turn 5. If you really see yourself being let's say that the enemy board is really weak, so you play Bestial Swipe into Fairy into Cairn, you no longer have to burn a Glade just to deal with 1 4/4 minion. So Bestial Swipe, super flexible, probably the best card for Forest this set by a very large margin. The next deck I'm going to go over is going to be Aggro Loot Sword. So the thing with Loot Sword is that this is a kind of high roll deck, because if you guys have played Roach at all, you know that Roach feels terrible without getting your main combo piece, which is Roach. Even missing stuff like Carbuncle and Cairn early on and Godwood can feel really, really bad if you don't draw them very early. This is kind of accentuated in Loot Sword because your entire game plan revolves around Sincero. So if you don't have Sincero in the top 3 or in the top 15, 20 cards of your deck will feel terrible. And the thing with Sword is that Sword's draw engine is not nearly as good as Roach's. Roach has so much draw, you're constantly cycling with Glade, Godwood, now with Bestial Swipe, you have stuff like Lily, you have so many ways to draw with Roach, and even Roach struggles to get Roach on time. If you're playing Loot Sword, you need to see Sincero early. Because without Sincero, by turn 7 or 8, your deck is not that great. And so you play Aggro Loot to lean into when you do draw Sincero to get more guaranteed wins when you do get lucky enough to draw him, if that makes sense. If you want to play a slower version of Loot Sword, that probably exists somewhere, but you have to play a lot more draw cards and you have to play a lot more cycling. And I don't know if that's really possible with Loot Sword, just because if you're going to play cycling, you're going to play for a longer game, you might as well just play Mid Sword, which plays a lot more value on big beefy minions, grinding your opponent out of resources, card checking your opponent, and then ending with Alberts and other things in the late game. Loot Sword doesn't really lend itself into that because you are kind of on a timeline because your minions in the interim aren't that good. Like you aren't playing fat minions that end the game right there. You're playing minions that build up towards Sincero, into Sincero, into a finisher, which is a timeline. And unfortunately, this set pushed a lot of crafts to be more tanky than usual. We'll see how long that lasts, but at the moment, like at least in the early game, like a lot of decks are being super greedy. So because there's not much aggro going on, without aggro, greed decks can play all the healing, all the late game they want, and so mid-range loot will feel even worse than it usually does. But aggro loot, because it's an aggro deck, can actually punish these greedy decks because if you get lucky enough, you just end them really easily. So you will still play Amelia. Amelia and Albert's like you might have from the previous sets. Amelia is your cycle and draw just in case you don't see Sincero or Albert later on. But you have stuff like Quickblader, Lance Trooper, Draconia, Vowels just to punch your opponent. Like in case you don't draw a Sincero and your opponent is playing greedy, you can still win with this like very basic force curve or sword curve where you like play Quickblader, Lance Trooper, Vowels, Draconia, maybe Congregant with some loot items to like clear the board, Amelia, you know, draw some more, etc. So like these 2-drops that are loot based like aren't as good as actual sword, like mid-range sword minions, but they do the job if you're playing aggro, and sometimes you don't even need Sincero to win if you have like Odin, Albert as a finisher. The next deck, this is going to be Rune. I don't know what the final deck list Rune ended on was. It's a little long because I have too many golden copies because of me just enchanting a bit willy-nilly earlier. There's no new cards. If you've seen Rune in the previous set, it's the exact same thing. No notes. The fourth deck list we're going to go over is going to be Ramp Base Dragon. This deck list is going to be a bit harder to predict because Ramp Dragon rather has gotten a lot of options. And Ramp Dragon is a bit of a misnomer because they don't have Fenny. Ramp with only like Dragon Sign and Liu Fang is a bit like, is it really considered a true Ramp deck at that point without Fenny and stuff? But I'm calling it Ramp because you are playing these Ramp cards and you will be prioritizing these Ramp cards in your mulligan if you do see them. So these cards are all just very basic good things for Dragon. Your ideal is to ramp obviously into your big cards that will steal the game for you, whether it's like stabilizing the board forcibly like Seasoned Merman and Neptune, or just slamming your opponent in the face and daring them to have a board clear like Forte and Garyu. These cards all do a lot of damage to your opponent's face if your opponent doesn't have the proper response or like healing enough. They can't heal enough basically to deal with you, then this adds up very quickly. You do need some early game just so you don't like flop over in case people do play aggro lists. And I have Pyreworm Blade just because I was playing Take 2 and it felt really good. I'm not gonna pretend that it's really great in Base Dragon, but I feel like if you ramp fast enough, you will have a lot of mana left over, so the incremental damage from Pyreworm will be decent in the long run. Again, I'm not a Dragon player, so I'm not going to pretend this is the final list. Like, I have a sneaky suspicion that a lot of the Ocean cards will be cycled out slowly as the set goes on and people figure out how to make Base Dragon or, like, Disdain Dragon, for example, better and better. So, the reason why I'm okay with putting Neptune and Odin and Garyu on here is because these cards are like fairly cheap, all things considered. Like Ocean Rider Silver, you'll get that eventually. Dogs one, you might open this randomly. A lot of these cards are cards you're gonna have from before, so it's fine to like. I'm like, okay, like people will probably have these, and they're also really good cards. So we'll see how far off I am with Base Dragon here. The next deck, this is Midrange Abyss. Now, the thing with Midrange Abyss is that they've gotten a lot of good cards. So if you're curious, the last 8 cards are Gensetsu, the 9 mana cost cards. The thing with Midrange Abyss is that people are saying that Mode Abyss is really good, but I think my only problem with Mode Abyss is that it is objectively slow. And slow decks, at least in this current meta, especially since everyone's playing really greedy, Mode Abyss might be better than Midrange Abyss and Control Abyss once everyone slows down and starts playing like more aggro and mid-range stuff, and Mode Abyss can actually get the value and stabilize. But I think Midrange Abyss is just really good because of the massive curve you have in the back end now and that you didn't have before. So obviously this is kind of like a high roll simulator because you do need to properly curve into your cards, but like mid-range is mid-range. That's how it is for all mid-range decks, right? So you have this beautiful curve of like Cultivator into a 2-drop, into a 3-drop, and you prep like the other 3 drops with Gaslight Sorry or Shadow Crypt, and you have like stuff like Congregate, Undead Soldier, RNB, Cerberus, Gensetsu, Yuzuki. Like, that's this 5 and beyond curve is so nasty, and not a lot of crafts will be able to survive that if you do get lucky enough to just curve straight into that. And again, you might not curve right into that, which is why Midrange Abyss is even better, because even if you have multiple copies of these 5 costs, they're still quite good. And something like Congregate has a bonus for super evoing, so you're not even that bad off if you didn't draw those good cards. Not much draw here, so again, probably inconsistent, and this is a deck that I think will be very different later on than what looks like in my version. I think what will end up happening is that certain cards will be taken out for more draw, for better consistency. So stuff like Mukon. Mukon's not the drawer card, but whatever that 5-mana 4/4 Evo deal 6 I have a feeling that that card will show up in some slower versions of this. Like you'll take out the Cultivator, and you'll take out Cultivator probably for those things. I just think Cultivator is good for the curve, and you also get Ghosts and preparation for your Cerberus turn, so it'll really smack your opponent in the face. So Mid-Abyss, like mid-range, I think will not have a dedicated deck list for a very long time, just because there's so many good cards. So the struggle will be finding out what cards are truly the best cards that you can play, and what cards are actually not that good and don't make the cut, and are actually ruining your curve and your card draw and consistency because they're not actually that good, but they seem good, and etc. The next craft is going to be Haven. I think my last Haven video was like very, very off, and I have my last Haven deck that I went over was very off, and I have I'm just gonna assume I'm very off again. This is essentially a Ward Haven package with a few new cards. So the new cards are specifically Knight of the Holy Order, Marwyn, and Congregate of Repose. So the reason why I think these 3 cards are good is because Knight of the Holy Order solves a somewhat glaring issue that Ward Haven had, where if you didn't get lucky early, like let's say that you were one of those Ward Havens that like only drew you drew Sarissa into Drew Grimnir or Holy Maiden into like a 4-drop, and your opponent's playing aggro, you really beat on your face, and then you try to stabilize with Salifa, and then you play Wilbur, and then your Wilbur gets Odin, and you play Aether, and you have to really pray your opponents and have like burn. So the thing that Knight of the Holy Order does for Ward Haven is that it gives you healing to maybe heal out of the lethal range that you'd otherwise be in from that really painful early game, assuming you didn't draw her for the early game. And this is important because Knight of the Holy Order, if you have the Wilbur buff, the moment she spawns, she heals you 1 HP. If you A for ult her, then she'll heal another HP. If you Divine Guard her, she'll heal another HP. If you have Dark Haven Grace, then you'll heal 2 HP from buffing her. So she actually adds up a lot of HP, and a Haven list that ironically has not much healing besides Salifa. So she's not amazing. I don't think she'll automatically make Ward Haven like tier 1. And honestly, like Marwyn being in here is a little troll. Like the Evo economy for Haven is a bit rough because you're gonna play Marwyn into maybe Salifa Evo or Congregate Evo. So it's like Evo. All of your Evos are gonna be played on curve, and then you're kind of like flopping around, hoping your opponent can't just murder you or like trade out Evos efficiently. Maybe they can, maybe they can't. I think if Ward Haven is really, really strong, my only prediction is that Knight of the Holy Order will be in their final list. And I think Sacred Griffin is just really good because you do sometimes get really strong base hits with Ward Haven, and then having Sacred Griffin with Dark Haven Grace just to deal that extra like 7 damage is really powerful. Because sometimes you just can't end the game properly, and Sacred Griffin with Wilbur, like that's +1. It'll be an 8/8 Storm, which isn't amazing, but you know, can close out a game in my opinion, and is a ward. So I think the cards that probably won't make it into the final list, Sacred Griffin and Congregate of Repose, these 2 cards, I'm a little iffy about, but in my head I'm like, oh, Finisher is always gonna be good for any grindy class, so I have Sacred Griffin in there. Maybe Odin is better, but yeah. Again, not an expert on this at all. And the final list we're going to go over, this is probably the deck list that I will want to craft soon. This is going to be Artifact Egg Portal. Now, this is definitely the most like I'm in the kitchen cooking and I'm probably burning everything within a 500-meter radius of me. I would not recommend building this list. Like, probably let me craft this, be upset when it's bad, and then complain about it in a future video. But a lot of people are playing Puppet-based Egg. Now, why is Puppet-based Egg bad? You actually have no pressure with Puppet-based Egg besides eggs and destruction. So the reason why I think Artifact is way better is because, first of all, you have a real 1-drop. Puppet can't start producing eggs until turn 3, unless you have coin, unless you're going second rather. So if you're going second, you can coin out the 2-drop that produces a puppet and then chomp it with a supplicant right after, or chomp it with a soprano right after, right? With Artifact, you fix the problem of needing to go first or needing to go second rather, because you can play turn 1 Elise. The odds of your opponent can kill Elise are really, really low unless their names are Dragoncraft and Sword with their 1-drops, or their 2-drops they can coin out to kill it. If they do that, then obviously you're a bit sad. In that case, like, you could probably argue taking out Rukina for the 2-drop is better, but it's just a little less terrible. So if it high roll, obviously, like, this deck list does need a lot of work because I haven't been able to craft it, and not many people are playing Artifact Egg, so I can't even see what works and what doesn't work. But to me, Artifact Egg, again, is better because you have an actual 1-drop that can immediately combo into Devastating Soprano, and then you can do all the shenanigans early game. Miriam, Rukina, both for Beyond, Outlet are all there to generate you parts so that you can actually end the game with Omega later on. So the issue with Egg, again, is that you have very little pressure with puppets. With Artifacts, what you can do is you can play Outlet, you can play Karula. These cards require your opponent to respond, and you can play betas that will ping your opponent a little faster. So not only are you getting the destruction effects that you already would have with Puppet, like Congruent Destruction, with stuff like Axia and Supplicant, like these are all cards you're already playing in Puppet, but now you have even more pressure from the face pings from your artifacts, and you have the Giga Artifact at the end that you can use to end your opponent if you do the curve. So the reason why I'm prioritizing this curve of, you know, Elise into 2-drops, into Miriam, Rukina, Outlet, is because these minions, if they do survive, if they hit your opponent's face at all, that's just that much less damage that you have to deal with pings. Now again, people are playing super greedy in this meta, so these ping-based decks probably won't be that good, but as the meta develops, like as more aggro decks and mid-range decks come to fruition, we can finally actually iron out these decks and see how much like tempo you actually need, how much you can sacrifice, how much you can cheat out in order to get these better late games. Because I really want Egg to be good because it looks really funny, and it's probably the most creative deck that Seconds has presented since Force, in my opinion. So yeah, that'll be all for this video. Let me know how much I am wrong on these crafts. Like again, I'm expecting some comments about the Haven craft because the Haven craft is probably not right again. But yeah, with all that said, I'll see you guys in the next one. Have a good day or night wherever you are, and I'll talk to you guys next time. Bye bye.